What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and it's time for my 2022 SEC predictions. We've gone through and done videos on every team, I think, except for maybe Missouri and Vanderbilt. So if you've been following along, you already know my predictions for most of the teams here in the SEC. But I'm going to show you what the standings will look like according to my predictions, and then we will predict the SEC championship game as well. We're going to start with the SEC East. The SEC East is, I think, going to be pretty competitive. I still think there's a clear team at the top. I don't see anyone taking them down. I think you all know who that is. But beyond that team, I think that there are several teams, 4 teams really, that are going to be fighting for that number 2 spot. But we're going to start at the bottom. We're going to start with Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt will finish at the bottom of the SEC. They're going 3-9 overall, 0-8 in the SEC. Just don't see them winning a conference game. And to be honest, they might not even go 3-9. They could go 2-10 or even 1-11. I think they're going to beat Elon, an FCS opponent. And then Hawaii and Northern Illinois, I've got them winning those games. I don't feel real confident. It's hard to say. They more than likely will probably lose one of those games. We'll see how it plays out. I'm going to go ahead and go with 3-9, though. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They are an SEC team. Clark Lee's second year, I think they'll improve some. And the defense, I think, will be pretty good for them. So that defense might be just enough for them to win those non-conference games. Not Wake Forest. I don't see them winning that non-conference game. But I've got them going 3-9. Again, maybe 2-10. Then we have Missouri. I've only got them going 1-7 in the conference, 4-8 overall. I do have them beating Vanderbilt. That would be their lone conference win. Missouri is just a team that I don't expect a whole lot from. I don't think that they're terrible, but the SEC is just really good. It's really tough. If Missouri played in the ACC, they'd probably be a middle-of-the-pack type team. But in the SEC, I think they're down towards the bottom because I think they're just a little bit behind some of these other teams. Maybe they could upset someone somewhere along the way and do a little bit better, but I think they just get that one conference win over Vanderbilt and then go 4-8 overall. All right, so the next 4 teams are actually all tied with their conference record. I had to go to the tiebreaker rules, and this is how the standings would actually look if you go to those tiebreaker rules. So South Carolina comes in at number 5. Again, they're tied for number 2. All these teams would be at number 2, tied for number 2. But 4-4 in the conference, 7-5 overall. I do have them losing to Clemson, but splitting their SEC games. I think that they will beat in the SEC. They'll beat Texas A&M, Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee. They get Tennessee at home. Losses to Georgia, Kentucky, Florida, and Arkansas. All of those games on the road except for Georgia. So I do have this team going 4-4 in the conference, 7-5 overall. Just ahead of them is Kentucky. Kentucky, I also have at 4-4. Again, these teams all tied. 8-4 in overall, 4-4 in the conference. I do have them beating Louisville in the non-conference. I have them losing to Florida on the road, Ole Miss, Tennessee on the road, and Georgia. I have them beating Vanderbilt, Missouri, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt, all home games. Their only road win in the conference. I have them going on the road and beating Missouri. So 8-4 for Kentucky. Then we move on to the team just ahead of them. Again, it's a tie, but Florida would be the team that is ahead of Kentucky and South Carolina based on the tiebreaker. I've got them going 4-4 again in the SEC, 7-5 overall. So I think they'll lose to Utah or Florida State. I think the way we did it is I actually had them losing to Florida State, beating Utah, but you can easily flip that around. I don't think they win both of those non-conference games. I do have them beating Kentucky at home, Missouri at home. I have them beating South Carolina at home, going on the road and beating Vanderbilt. I have them losing to Tennessee on the road, LSU, Georgia, and Texas A&M on the road. And again, if you follow my videos, it's not really about all the individual games. I make my predictions, then I go in and fill the games to make the records come out where I'm predicting them to be, because you can't, I mean, it's crazy to try to pick individual games this far out. But it would come out to 7-5. That's the record for Florida. And then Tennessee is the team that actually wins the tiebreaker for number 2. Also at 4-4, 8-4 overall. I've got Tennessee beating Pitt in the non-conference. That'll be a big win for them if they can get it. I have them beating Florida at home, Kentucky at home, Missouri at home, and also beating Vanderbilt on the road. Losses on the road at LSU, losing to Alabama at home, and then going on the road and losing to Georgia and South Carolina. 3 tough road games for them with LSU, Georgia, and South Carolina. The way it worked out for the tiebreaker You went to, so these teams are all tied. I went to the head-to-head. I think they were all like 2-2 against each other. And then it went down to their record in the division. Tennessee and Kentucky both lost to their two opponents out of the, or excuse me, Florida and Tennessee both lost to their opponents out of the SEC West. So they kind of separated. I have Tennessee beating Florida. They have the head-to-head. And then Kentucky beating South Carolina. They have the head-to-head there. And that's why the standings look the way they do. Our number one team in the SEC East, it's Georgia. No real surprise here. I do have them going 12-0. I know a lot of people think they might lose one game this year. I don't see it happening. I still think that they are so far above everyone else just from an overall talent perspective. Yes, the defense is going to drop off, but the offense should be pretty good. I mean, they're going to have probably one of the better offenses in the SEC. A lot coming back on that side of the ball. Everyone likes to hate on Stetson Bennett. He did just win a national championship. The kid's not that bad. He's actually a pretty good quarterback. And, you know, he can run a little bit. He came up in the clutch in that national championship game. I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. I think he's going to prove that this year. And I think Georgia is going to go undefeated in the regular season all the way to the SEC championship. Here is the SEC West. We're going to do this one next, and we'll take a look at what the standings will look like based off of my predictions. SEC West, I think there's a clear favorite, just like in the East. You probably already know who that is, but we'll save it for last anyways. And then I think really 2 through 7 could be in any order. I really feel like the SEC West is wide open outside of that top team. I wouldn't be surprised at all if one team does kind of emerge, but I think the teams are going to beat up on each other. You're going to see several losses for every single team outside of that top team. Maybe someone emerges kind of like Ole Miss did last year, but it's hard to really predict who that team would be. I know a lot of people think it'll be Texas A&M. I'm not sold on them. I think they have a chance to be that team, but I don't feel confident on that. So again, wide open division. I feel like it really could go any different way here outside of that top team. But we're going to start at the bottom based off of my predictions. I think we had a tie at the bottom. The bottom two teams. Auburn does come in here in last place. 7-5 overall. 3-5 in the conference. I've got them beating Penn State in the non-conference, getting a big win there at home. I also have them beating Missouri and LSU at home, and beating Arkansas at home, losing to Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama on the road, and then losing one home game in the conference to Texas A&M. If they're able to beat Texas A&M or maybe beat Mississippi State, could see them going 8-4. Wouldn't be that big of a surprise. Again, I think this division is wide open outside of that top team. The team that I think they'll be tied with is Mississippi State, so I do have them winning the head-to-head, and that's why they would be ahead of Auburn here. So 3-5 in the conference, 7-5 overall. I've got them taking care of business against both Memphis and Arizona in the non-conference, losing to LSU on the road, Kentucky on the road, Alabama on the road, Ole Miss on the road, and then losing to Georgia at home. They have a really tough schedule in the conference. Beating Auburn at home, beating Arkansas at home, and beating Texas A&M at home. Again, you could change some of these games around. That's fine. It's not really all about picking all the individual games. It's crazy to try to pick games like that this far out. But it's just, again, I make my predictions, pick how I think the standings are going to go and all of that, and then I go back in and fill in the games. And so that's how it wound up for Mississippi State. So Auburn and Mississippi State at the bottom, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if one of these teams doesn't emerge and finish second or third in this division. It wouldn't surprise me because I think it is that wide open. Our next four teams are all going to be tied at 4-4 in the conference, and we'll start here with Ole Miss. They wound up at the bottom just because of tiebreakers. But yes, 4-4 in the SEC, 8-4 overall for the Rebels. I have them beating Georgia Tech in the non-conference, beating Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Auburn, and Mississippi State, losing to LSU and Texas A&M on the road, Arkansas also on the road, and then losing to Alabama. So yeah, again, this division's wide open, and Ole Miss could do it just like they did last year. They could emerge as that number 2 team. A lot of question marks with some of these new faces, some of these transfers, but if they all come together, Ole Miss has potential, again, to be a top 10, top 15 team. Wouldn't be surprised at all if they are there. LSU comes in at number 4, also 4-4, and I say number 4, but they would be tied at number 2, 8-4 in the conference. I have them beating Florida State in the non-conference, beating Mississippi State at home, Tennessee at home, beating Ole Miss at home, going on the road and beating Florida, losing to Auburn on the road, Arkansas and Texas A&M on the road, and then losing to Alabama at home. Again, change the games around however you want to do it, but 8-4 would be my record for this team. And I said everyone's tied at number 2. Actually, our number 2 team does come just ahead. So they're actually tied at number 3. So we have 3 teams tied at number 3: Arkansas, LSU, and Ole Miss. I've got Arkansas at 4-4, 8-4 in the conference. They're going to have some tough non-conference games with Cincinnati and BYU, but I think they are able to pull out both of those. I also have them beating South Carolina at home, beating Ole Miss at home, going on the road and beating Missouri as well, and LSU. LSU at home. I have them losing to Texas A&M and Alabama, on the road at Mississippi State, and on the road at Auburn. Those would be the 4 losses. So when you go to the tiebreaker here, it came down to head-to-head, or it may have came down to record in the division. I can't even remember now. But Arkansas did win the tiebreaker, and then LSU beating Ole Miss head-to-head. LSU wound up ahead of Ole Miss, and that's why they're in this order. But it's really just a tie. And I said we had a 3-way tie or a 4-way tie at number 2, but Texas A&M actually does come in just ahead of these teams. I have them going 8-4, but I have them going 5-3 in the conference. So I think their conference record is going to be a little bit better, and that's why they will be ahead. Because I do have them losing to Miami. I know everyone thinks that's crazy. They're playing them at home. Everyone thinks that I'm overhyping this Miami team, but I feel pretty good about that prediction. Don't feel great about it, but I think it could happen, and I'm going to stick with it. So I have them losing to Miami, losing to Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Alabama all on the road. And then they get some of their big games at home. Ole Miss at home, Florida at home, LSU at home. They play Arkansas on a neutral field. Schedule sets up well for them in the conference with some of those home games. So I do think they will be just ahead of these teams with their conference record. But overall record, I've got Texas A&M sitting there at 8-4, just like Arkansas, LSU, and Ole Miss. Number 1 team is Alabama. Really, no surprise, of course. Going 12-0, 8-0 in the conference. I see this team going undefeated, and they could lose a game. They're going to play some tough teams. Arkansas played them tough last year. They got to play LSU on the road. That's going to be a tough game there. Arkansas also is on the road. Texas A&M beat them last year. You got Ole Miss on the road. Iron Bowl. There are a lot of tough games, but I just think this team is too good to lose. I don't see them losing a game. If they do, I definitely don't see them losing more than 1 game. But I think they're that much better than everyone else, that they're able to even go on the road and win some of these games. And I've got Alabama finishing at the top of the SEC West, going 12-0 and 8-0 in the conference. That sets up Georgia and Alabama in the SEC Championship. We've seen them play twice in the SEC Championship the last few years. Of course, played in the National Championship twice as well. I think it'll be a pretty good game. Georgia can match them talent-wise. Can they match the explosiveness of Bryce Young on offense? That's going to be the question, because I think Georgia's defense is not going to be able to hold Alabama down as well as they did last year. I know Alabama still scored some points, but they did a pretty good job against a really high-powered offense, especially in the National Championship. Maybe not so much in the SEC Championship. So I think Alabama is going to be able to score in this game. And I think the defense for Alabama will make some plays in the second half to where I think they'll win it by about 10 points, maybe 14 points, 2 possessions. Alabama's just too good. Both sides of the ball, I think they're the best team in the SEC. And I think they will be SEC champions once again in 2022. That's my prediction. What's your prediction? How do you see the standings playing out? Let me know down in the comments below.